What's happening, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of How to Be a Successful Personal Trainer with me, Zach Murphy. In today's episode, we're going to discuss all the different options which are available to you to work as a personal trainer and the best options that will suit both your lifestyle and the way that you like to train your clients. So let's start with the 4 main options which are available. So a commercial gym, a studio, a private home studio, or outdoors. These are kind of your 4 main options as a trainer, okay? Within those, obviously, there's a lot of detail that you need to think about, which will dictate whether you work in one option or another. But it's important to note that none of these are exclusive options. Okay, so you can technically work in all of them at the same time, or a combination of one or two. So you'll have gone through the process of doing your PT qualification. Some of you will have done an intensive course. Others will have done a distance learning course, which can take anything from 9 to 12 months. Really, now you need to think about how you're going to put that information into practice and become a trainer in the real world. So let's start with the main option. Most of you, if you're going to qualify as a PT, will have the idea that you're going to work in a commercial gym. That's what I've done for the majority of my time as a trainer. And in my opinion, that's probably the option which is going to allow you to have the most longevity in the industry and the greatest chance of success as well. There's a few different options though within that gym environment, which will ultimately dictate partly how successful you'll be, but also whether or not it's the right option for you. So you've got the employed model, you've got the hybrid model, and then you've got the self-employed model. So the main options as an employee will be either Virgin Active or David Lloyd. Both of those operate a very similar system, and I'm going to kind of go into a bit more detail about that slightly further in the video. The hybrid model, you're looking at places like Fitness First, Pure Gym, The Gym. I'll explain what the hybrid model means as well. And then the self-employed model will be places like Gymbox or Anytime Fitness. So let's talk about the employed model. This is what I did for 8 years of my career working in Liverpool Street. The employed model has a few pros and cons. So firstly, you're a lot more secure in your job as an employee in a gym. And I'll explain what I mean by that when I get onto the self-employed model a little bit later. As an employee, it's very difficult for that club to get rid of you as a trainer. Like, they really have to jump through a lot of hoops. They have to demonstrate that, they've done everything within their power possible to allow you to be successful there. Otherwise, technically speaking, you could sue them for unfair dismissal or constructive dismissal and that type of stuff. So it's in their interest to hire people who are better than the average PT. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen because the pool of PTs they have to draw from, based on how they choose to pay their pay their trainers, and the amount that they pay their trainers isn't actually that great. Okay, and so you end up in this sort of limbo situation where people aren't really getting paid that much, so the quality of what they do isn't that great. At least that's my experience anyway. So with the employee model, the benefits are that you'll get basically some holiday pay, or you should do at least. Where I worked, how that would be worked out was that you would get paid an average daily amount based on the number of sessions you've done in a 13-week period prior to the holiday which you took. And so obviously that's a bit of a bonus because, especially as a self-employed personal trainer, you're going to have to base your session rate on the idea that for a good 4 weeks of the year, you might not be working. And obviously, that means that there's no income coming from you, and if you're lucky, you might get a gym that will give you a bit of holiday from the rent that you pay, but that isn't always the case. All right, so you're going to already have to have a higher rate as a self-employed personal trainer than you would do if you're working in a gym. So another benefit of working in the employee model is that you'll be in a larger team of PTs where you'll have continual support. And so it's a bit more like a mentorship program when you first start. You'll have a manager, you'll have senior trainers in the club, often one of whom will be someone that is assigned to a new trainer. That's what I used to have to do with some of the new trainers in the club which I worked at, just to try to basically make sure that they felt comfortable doing what they were doing. They felt comfortable in the environment they were training people, and also basically they knew all of the ropes. They knew how to build their business, how to do a consultation probably with a client, all of those sort of really important things that you should know to how to do as a trainer, but you never get taught. Moving on to the hybrid model. With the hybrid model, like I said, you're looking at places like Fitness First, The Gym, Pure Gym. What they'll basically do is they'll give you, say, 1 or 2 shifts a week, sometimes 3, depends on the gym that you're working at, where you have to do, say, like a 7 or 8 hour shift as a fitness coach, where you're doing inductions, you're kind of tidying the gym floor, helping out the other gym floor members of staff, interacting with members, that kind of thing. And then you can obviously do your PT outside of that, and that will offset how much rent you pay, or you might not actually pay any rent at all as a result of doing that. And so if you say, I think they have like a scaled system where if you do 3 shifts a week, you don't pay rent. If you do 2 shifts, then you'll pay kind of, 30% of what the rent is for that gym. And so that can work quite well for some people because, not everyone is going to want to have that initial outlay every single month, especially if they're not particularly busy and they're not that motivated to sign up new clients. So, also as well, you're going to be forced to be in that environment where you have to interact with members, etc., which is going to allow you to build your business maybe a slight bit more easily than in, say, some of the other options which are available. And then moving on to the self-employed model. So the self-employed model is essentially somewhere you pay rent, okay? So that would be, like I said, gym box, Anytime Fitness. Now, where the club that you work in will largely dictate how much rent you pay. So it can be anything from like £300 a month up to £1,500 a month every single month. Usually with those options, they'll give you like, the first month of rent free and then the second month only 50% rent. But usually always by that third month, you're paying full rent. So basically you need to be mindful of that and think, am I good enough? And are my skills as good as the other people who work here in order to compete with them and directly try and, what I said, compete with them and sign up clients in that environment and retain them obviously as well. Because obviously, if you're, say, not as good as somebody else and that client trains with you, and then whilst they're training with you, they see somebody else that, is much more enthusiastic with their clients, is a lot more attention to detail focused, etc., they might choose they might choose to train with them instead. All right. So whether you like it or not, you are always directly competing with anyone that you're working around, whether they're your friends or not. So some important factors to consider when you're choosing where to work are basically, what is your personality type like? All right. And so this is a really, really important thing to know. Okay. As I mentioned before, you're a lot more secure in your job when you're an employee because you have employment law on your side, basically. As a self-employed personal trainer, you're essentially a contractor, which means that contract can be terminated at any moment, okay? The reason I said this is that within my time in the industry, personally, I've not actually had any kind of altercations with difficult members, usually because I'm quite good at biting my tongue. I've had a few people say some, stupid comments here and there, sometimes say stuff like, oh, you're on steroids, or like, stupid things like that in front of your clients, and you have to just kind of laugh it off and stuff. But you will come across people, especially in those higher end gyms, that are very entitled, that have no qualms whatsoever with saying, unpleasant things to you, kind of, making disrespectful comments, that type of stuff. And, you do really need to rise above it as much as possible. All right. It's the same in any workplace, obviously. But like I said, if you're in that self-employed version of a gym, like Gym Box or Anytime Fitness and that kind of thing, then unfortunately in those environments, they can get rid of you like that. And so, you need to be mindful of that if some sort of, altercation occurs, that member then, complains to the gym, etc., and says, there's this PT, he's been abusive to me, whatever, they just make stuff up. Very often, they'll always side with their member, which means that, essentially you're going to lose your job, and so it's important to, like I said, try and kind of be as placid as possible, regardless of whichever environment that you train in order to avoid those situations in the first place, or try and nip them in the bud as quickly as possible. So like I said, I've not experienced anything like that myself, but my colleagues have. And I've firsthand experienced one of my best friends basically losing his job because of a member that had a reputation to begin with about hogging equipment, swearing at members of staff, being generally disrespectful in every element of his life that you could probably think of. And yet he was allowed to continue his membership whilst my friend lost his job. It was early in the morning, the guy was hogging equipment, he started swearing at my friend for no reason. And then my friend, I think, said, go away, I've got no interest in talking to you, blah, blah, blah. He then lied and basically said that my friend had sworn at him. And as a result, my friend lost his job. Which is a really sad scenario to happen, but this type of stuff does happen in these high-end gyms. You have to be aware of it. So moving away from that traditional gym environment, what are some of the other options that you can work in as a trainer? So personally, I worked in a private PT studio just near Liverpool Street. So I actually did this because I wanted to see whether or not it would be a better environment to train my clients, and also as well at the same time, whether or not it would be more lucrative as a trainer. So initially I'd done the numbers, and based on where I was working before as an employee, where they take a large percentage cut of the session rate that you charge as a trainer, the amount which I was kind of giving away, so to speak, per month was almost triple what the rent was on this studio that I was looking to work in. And so from my perspective, I was like, this is really good, actually. I might give this a try and see how it goes. So I was very fortunate at that time where I had a very loyal client base who, you know, were training with me at least twice, some 3 times a week, had 15, 16 clients along these lines. So I had a good number of hours that I was doing every single week as a trainer. All of those clients were willing to come with me to the new environment, to the studio, and that's what they did. And, you know, it was very good initially, is what I would say. But what you'll find is that it's difficult for a private studio to directly compete with a big mainstream gym. So the gym that I worked in previously, like I said, was a very high-end gym. Had, you know, all the bells and whistles, like, you know, Molten Brown soap, fluffy towels, dressing gowns in the changing rooms, GHD hair dryers and straighteners and that type of stuff. In the studio, obviously, none of that stuff was available, all right? And so, you know, you might think, oh, it's not that big a deal, but actually to some people that is, because they like that whole experience of, you know, going there, the kind of spa type experience after they've trained hard and stuff, sitting in the sauna, whatever it might be. You don't really get that in the studio, or it's very unlikely that you get that in the studio. So it's worth kind of bearing in mind what your demographic is of your clients and whether or not they'll be happy in the environment you want to change to. So for me, I worked there for 6 months. I worked there from June until basically New Year. And probably around September, mid-September towards October, I decided, I was like, nah, this isn't working. What had happened was that, you know, the facilities at that studio weren't that great. And a lot of the clients that I trained were choosing not to shower there anymore. And so that meant that everything was a lot more difficult for them. So, you know, they would either finish training in the evening and they would go home and shower at home, or if they trained in the morning, they would go back to their office. Very often their offices had showers and stuff, and they'd prefer to shower there instead. And so I kind of realized that unless something is as easy as possible, most of those clients aren't going to want to stay there for the long term. All right, they'll do it for a bit, but then after a while, they're like, oh, do you know what, man? Like, it's a pain in the backside having to go to my office to shower after my sweaty gym clothes. You know, I've got to bring all my own toiletries with me. I've got to bring a towel with me. It's a faff, you know, and that's literally what happened, you know. So it wasn't even necessarily that the studio wasn't great. It was just the kind of the additional elements of that experience of training someone that were enough of a reason for people to start to kind of be a bit cagey about whether they wanted to go there anymore or not, whether they wanted to train there. So like I said, I decided to go back to the gym I was working at previously. Obviously, they were happy to have me back, etc. Fell back into the same routine which I was doing previously and just carried on as I was. So that's one version of a studio. That's what I would class as like a proper private studio. And so another option which is available to you is to be an employee in a studio. All right, so there's a few which I can mention. I think one is Matt Roberts. And there's another one which I believe is actually closed down now, which was close to where I used to work, just near the Gherkin, called Embody Fitness. Because I did actually look at working there basically when I was, you know, thinking about leaving my employee model. With those versions of a studio, what you basically end up doing is, like I said, you're an employee. So you get a shift that you work on, like, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it might be, 10 till 6, and you don't have your own clients. So what basically happens is that the studio is kind of a buffer between you and the client. And so the client will purchase a number of sessions with the studio and then say, I want to train at 3 o'clock on Wednesday. And then they say, okay, at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, we've got this person, this person, and this person available. Who do you want to train with? The following week, I want to train at, you know, 10 a.m. on a Friday. Okay, we've got this person, this person, this person available. Who do you want to train with? And obviously in this environment, it's suboptimal for the client, but it's a very good business model because you've got PTs that are always busy. They don't really care because obviously they're getting work, they're getting paid, etc. The client doesn't really know any better. Because they'll be sort of told that, oh, you're on a set program, so it doesn't matter who you train with. All of our trainers can execute that program, and it's the best thing since sliced bread. Not really how it works, but obviously, like I said, they don't really know that. And then, yeah, then after that, then they can just, like I said, train when they want, pay for certain sessions, and you know, you don't actually have your own clients, which is not great because then obviously, if you leave that environment to go somewhere else, you got no one to take with you. You got no business anymore. You're just a PT with no clients, all right? And so, that option is okay for some people. It's not personally something which I'd ever want to choose to do myself. Like I said, when I realised that one near the Gherkin was that set up, I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's embarrassing, to be honest with you. I'm not going to take my clients to somewhere like that. And so, they're, like I said, the kind of two versions of a studio. Another option, obviously, if you're lucky enough to have one, is to have a private studio in your home. Obviously, the downside to this is that you've got to buy all the equipment. Marketing is very difficult because obviously you're just in your house, and even if you're the best trainer in the world, it's difficult for you to attract business in the local area where you live, wherever that might be. And so, it's a very private setting, but sometimes you can lose that atmosphere. And so what I found personally with the studio that I worked in, it was very devoid of atmosphere at times. And there were some times when it was literally just me and my client training in that gym, and it was like training in a library. So another option that you can look at as well is working outside. So, the benefits to that obviously are that, marketing is quite easy, because if you're training someone in a park, there's lots of people in the park. They're going to see you training a client. They're going to maybe say, oh, can I take your contact number and I'd like to train with you too, etc. It's quite an easy way to keep, revenue going. Upside, obviously, it's lovely to be outside in the fresh air. It's good for you, all that kind of stuff. It's good to get natural daylight, etc. The downside is that you've got to lug around all the equipment that you need to train someone. All right, and if there's ways in which you want to train someone, like with a squat rack, bar, plates, blah blah blah, you've got to find a way of basically transporting that to a park. It can be done. I've seen it be done. It's not easy though. All right, so what you tend to end up doing is using pieces of equipment which are easily transportable. So like a TRX, bands, battle ropes, even some light kettlebells, that kind of stuff, which is fine for a period. But what ends up happening is that you end up being more of like a fitness trainer rather than a personal trainer. So basically, you're just someone that meets someone in the park and sets up some circuits. Like I said, that's kind of what I've seen from all the years of paying attention when I've been in parks around London, like Regent's Park, Paddington Rec, Hyde Park even. That's what I see, because how do you get a squat rack to those areas? It's nigh on impossible, and bars and plates and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, as long as your client is happy to train in that environment, fantastic. But they should be aware, obviously, that, it's suboptimal. The optimal environment to train somebody in is a gym, because, you've got all of the equipment that you need to use there. So like I said, guys, these are the main options which are available to you as a trainer. As I've mentioned before in episode 1, I personally feel that training in a gym is definitely the best environment for you to have a long-lasting career in the fitness industry. That's what I've done myself. That's what I've been very successful in doing myself. And whether you go for the employee model or the self-employed model and stuff like that, that will largely come down to preference. What I would usually say to most people is, if you're starting out, go for an employee model. You're going to get that mentorship, learn the industry a little bit, learn what it's like training clients, organizing your diary, all that kind of stuff. Then when you've got that locked down, go to a self-employed gym, because you always make more money there. It's a higher risk environment, because you need to basically be good enough to compete with, like I said, those other trainers that might be very experienced, but it can be done. I've seen it be done. I've done it myself, and there's no reason why other people can't do it too. So that pretty much wraps up episode 2 of how to be a successful personal trainer. In our next episode, we're going to be looking at how to build your business. This is going to be a really important episode, so I'm going to leave the link to that just at the end of this video. And that's going to give you some really good insight into the best methods to build your business, basically, and be a successful trainer in a gym environment. I hope you found today useful. If you have, drop it a thumbs up. If there's anyone that you think might find it useful too, that maybe doesn't know the ins and outs of different areas of the industry or ways in which to train people, please share the video with them. If you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, because there's going to be a lot more other videos that will be useful too. And I will see you very soon for another video.